So football now on the agenda for the SportsMax Zone. 12 of the 18 rounds of the South American World Cup qualifying now completed. And as per usual, both matches played and the table as tight as ever. Let's see how it panned out. Brazil dropping points for the second game in a row, 1-1 with Uruguay. Argentina widening their lead atop the standings with a 1-0 win over Peru. Colombia dropping points there in a 1-0 loss to Ecuador, who are now undefeated in their last 5 matches. Bolivia 2-2 with Paraguay, and Chile winning 4-2 over Venezuela. Argentina 5 points clear atop the table with their 25 points, coming from 8 victories, by far the winningest, as the Americans would say, team in the tournament. Uruguay, Ecuador closest to them in the standings, along with Colombia. Brazil in 5th position on 18 points, Paraguay in 6th on 17. Bolivia, Venezuela, Chile and Peru having work to do. There's a 3-point deduction for the Ecuadorians as well, factored into those standings. Now, due to the expansion of the upcoming World Cup for 2026, which will feature 48 teams, the top 6 in CONMEBOL will receive automatic qualifying spots, while the 7th place team will play in an inter-confederation playoff. A few matches from the last round stood out, with one being 2nd placed Uruguay and 5th placed Brazil playing to a 1-1 draw. So let's start there. We have Juan Giarango to talk to us about that. Brazil dropping points for the 2nd game in a row in a campaign that hasn't been flourishing for them, Juan. How worried will the Brazil fans be about their current form and trajectory in these World Cup qualifiers?
Hey, Lance, how are you? Yeah, I've been wondering that. But when I was talking to some colleagues the other day, it was mind-boggling. I had to ask them the same question about 2 or 3 times just to make sure I wasn't hearing something weird. They're saying, oh, no. Uruguay coming into this match are the favorites. Wait, what are you talking about? Because Brazil have been playing that poorly. Brazil with Vinicius. One thing is Vinicius Jr. with Real Madrid. One thing is Vinicius Jr. with Brazil. No Rodrigo. The player that they say they were missing the most, well, number 1 is Neymar. Number 2 is Casemiro. So it shows you 2 things. You don't have that different player in this Brazilian lineup. And number 2, you don't have that leadership in the middle, where you see a very underwhelming midfield, to say the least, compared to historic midfields of Brazilian football. So some are saying, well, you know what? It is what it is. Right now, this is what Brazil has. This is all Brazil's got, unless Neymar ends up being able to recover from his injuries and come back against Colombia in March, in which he could be basically a starter and jump in after almost a year and change of not playing.
Yeah, but it's unthinkable almost, Juan, to talk about Brazil not qualifying. I've seen many cycles of South American World Cup qualifiers where sometimes the big teams, the Argentinas, the Brazil, may be stuttering, but they usually get through in the end. And at the moment, the team that most threatens Brazil, just outside the top 6 of automatic, they're like 5 points ahead of them. So I know Brazil fans would be a little concerned about their stuttering form, but in reality, they should get there, and then, you know, it's a matter of preparing themselves well for 2026.
Yeah, the question is, okay, fine, they get to the World Cup, how far are they going to go? I mean, are they going to get to quarters once again, which ends up being basically the same thing over again, a lot of the same issues that they've had over and over again. It really ends up being a sombering issue in terms of Brazilian football in and of itself, because again, the last player that's really captivated the world, and it's been mostly noted in Brazilian media. It's not me just saying it for the sake of saying it, because I've been watching Brazilian TV over the last week or so, especially after Santos comes back up to the 1st division of Brazilian football. And not only that, they're coming back to the most competitive league in all of America, whether however you consider America geographically, from Alaska all the way to Patagonia. Brazil is the best league in this part of the world. No doubt, hands down the best league in the world. But yet when it comes to a national team, it ends up being very underwhelming compared to the history and the pedigree that they have.
Yeah, and the fact is that people are talking about Neymar's possible return, but from a World Cup perspective, Neymar, well, in some instances because of injury, but he hasn't been that kind of an impact player for Brazil in the past. And coming from a lengthy injury layoff, you wonder how much he could offer this team, even if he, returns to playing fitness.
It's funny because you're saying he's a player that hasn't been offered a lot of impact, but he's been their most impactful.
Yes.
So it says everything about. It says a lot about everybody else, though.
Yes.
I mean, to your point, and it's him with very little, he's been able still to outshine everybody else in the Brazilian national team. Yeah. So to your point, yeah, it's pretty. And of course, like I was saying, with Santos coming back to the first division, the speculation of Neymar returning to Brazilian football, and hopefully he's able to refine himself with his roots instead of getting lost in the perversions of money in European football. he ends up being, well, kind of that X factor, or even more so a question mark.
Yeah, and that goal won for Federico Valverde, of course, saving Brazil there. Ensuring that they ended with a draw. Of course, that was the opening goal. Then, of course, Uruguay went to equalize. But a massive goal, a key goal for Brazil in a time like this.
Gerson, with his goal, I mean, both goals were sensational. I mean, Gerson's goal, the way he's able to bring that ball back down, unfortunately for him, he's able to return to the national team. But, I mean, this is a far cry from the Gerson that was playing at Flamengo a couple of years ago under Jorge Jesus. That being said, you need one of those moments, and it's kind of different to see a player like him being able to step up when he was expected to do so when he went to Olympique Marseille. In Federico Valverde's case, it's ironic because he's probably been the most criticized player on the Uruguayan national team. I mean, mind you, he plays for just like Vinicius, he plays at Real Madrid. He's undisputed in terms of his leadership, in terms of his performance, in terms of his presence as one of the captains of Real Madrid. Yet he goes to Uruguay, and he's absolutely lambasted by the media in Uruguay. But then he comes up with a big goal yesterday. And again, it's one of those. I can even add Lucho Diaz to that list as well. I mean, you see that a lot in South American football. Well, yeah, he's playing great in Europe, but he doesn't do a thing here.
Yeah.
And that ends up being the biggest argument when it comes to that type of player.
Yeah, and I think that has been one of the narratives for a lot of these players. They play good for their clubs, but when they go back for country, it's they look a shadow of themselves, and it comes back down to the coaching and how the time that these coaches get with these players. Do you think Brazil's coach Dorival Jr. will the country be patient with him and give him an opportunity to prove himself, or do you see Brazilian fans calling for him to go?
Well, the Brazilian fans. Well, I don't know. The Brazilian clients, I would say, would be like, well, okay, I'm talking about the Brazilian fans abroad that just follow the national team and don't have a team like Flamengo or Palmeiras. They just follow the national team alone. That's okay, fine, it's Brazil. But the national team fans, they have no patience. Brazil has no patience. Brazilian fans, they want to win. They want to win now. They want to win always. And that is the case when it comes to the national team. I mean, when you look at the European players, it's a different beast. I mean, a lot of these players have to fly 6, 7, 8 time zones. They're flying 10, 13, 14 hours to come back to train once, maybe twice with their national team, go and play, jump on a plane, go somewhere else 3, 4, 5, 6 hours within South America, which unlike Europe, the longest flight you're going to have is 2.5, 3 hours. South America, you're going to have a 5, 6, 7 hour flight. Then you play another match, then you jump on another plane, and you go back 5, 6, 7 time zones to play 2 or 3 days later in Europe. So that again ends up being a completely different beast compared to everything else. So there is fatigue out of the pitch, outside the pitch, but then you don't have any continuity within the pitch because you only have 1 or 2 practices. And Marcelo Bielsa has been very adamant about that as well, saying, well, I have to try and simplify things. I have to try and make things a little bit more understandable and be able to help them evolve slowly but surely into what I want them to play, which has been a problem for Uruguay, seeing how they've been able to play recently.
Yeah, for sure. And, sitting pretty at the top of the table, Argentina, they've been doing so well this season. One, Lautaro Martinez equaling Diego Maradona's the scoring record. And it's as if, this Argentina team has been getting everything right.
There was a great phrase in a critique that was made of the Argentina, because in Argentina, they usually have critiques after the match. It's a 10, 15-minute monologue that the co-commentator gives you in terms of how Argentina played. Argentina are immune to losing. That was the term that I had heard a lot. And of course, a lot of that immediately kind of was dissipated after the gambling scandal within the Argentine League emerged earlier today. But yeah, to your point, you see Lautaro Martinez coming in, but it's a team that is beginning to find its way back. Some players are finding their way. Some new players are beginning to emerge. It's a whole case of, and it always happens with teams. I mean, I don't care which team you're talking about. You can talk about Pep's Barcelona, Real Madrid, Pep under City. Those teams that have had extreme and big amount, a lot of success, always found a way to have to evolve because they don't want the opposition to catch up. Argentina are at that point right now. They're at that crossroads because you see certain players that aren't up to snuff, that aren't being able to perform properly. And that's when you end up seeing the new players emerge. But with Lautaro Martinez and company, you see them continuing to be one of those beacons of consistency in terms of the Argentine national team. Yeah,
and what shocked me about Peru, is that they failed for any attempt when it came to the target, shots on target one. And I think it came as a shock for me because I've watched Peru play for quite some time. And I've never seen them play so poorly where the numbers are like this.
Well, when you have a 41-year-old Paolo Guerrero still playing, there's been no changeover. There's been no cycles of new players coming in. You still have Luis Advíncula at right back. You still have a lot of players that are still part of the Peruvian national team, I mean, that we were talking about back in 2015, 2016, 2018 when they went to the World Cup. There's been very little. Pedro Gallés is still in goal. Not that Pedro Gallés is poor. It's just that there really is no turnover in terms. I mean, the only significant turnover, if you want to call him that, was Gianluca Lapadula. And he's 34, 35 now. So again, you have to start seeing how Peru is. And it's a team that offensively has been diminishing as every year passes because there's really no number 9 anymore. And that's been a huge problem for them.
Yeah. And Juan, before you wrap, a quick comment on Ecuador, who are currently 3rd in the table, undefeated now in their last 5 games. They have the best unbeaten run in the current playoffs. I think they made 2 of the last 4 World Cups. Their defensive record impressive, conceding only 4 goals in their campaign so far from like 12 matches. So there's something good about Ecuador's game at the moment.
They hadn't won in Colombia in 47 years. That's another thing that needs to be mentioned. And they were intelligent. I mean, I even mentioned it on Colombian television a little while ago, talking about, hey, look, they were a man down for 56 minutes. Pierre Hincapié ends up being sent off. And they're a team that understands how to attack certain things. I mean, Sebastián Becachese is a very understanding, a very tactically endowed type of coach. Of course, having been an assistant to Jorge Sampaoli for so many years and also being able to blaze his own trail. Very, very intelligent in terms of what he is able to do defensively and understanding, because just as much as you have to give praise to Ecuador, you also have to start questioning Colombia, because Colombia, remember I was talking about evolution when it comes to Argentina. Well, Colombia hasn't evolved since that 28-match unbeaten streak. They're still doing the same things that they were doing before. The only thing is that the opposition have already figured them out. And Ecuador have been very intelligent about that. They have players that understand how to play, they understand how to defend, and they understand how to move around as a tandem. So give them a lot of credit because they really deserve that win against Colombia.
Okay, Juan, we're going to leave it there. Thanks a lot. And we'll be in touch with the South American qualifiers, which are live on SportsMax and SportsMax 2. Thanks, Juan.
All right, talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, great. And we'll be back with more on the SportsMax Zone after the break.